Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. It's become very clear that Brent Venables, this Oklahoma program, are going to be making significant changes to this program over the next couple months. It's obviously going to start at the offensive coordinator position, but you're going to see some changes from a personnel standpoint as well. And I think the good thing for Oklahoma fans in this modern era of college football with the transfer portal, you can turn around your roster in just one offseason. Now, I think the conversation that we're going to get into, and we're just going to, have an early conversation of where does Oklahoma need to go this offseason at the offensive coordinator position in the transfer portal to get this thing back rolling in 2025. I'm going to start with this, and I would like to hear from the Oklahoma fans. This might sound like I'm sunshine pumping, and I want to make it very clear that I'm not. Like, you look at the product on the offensive side of the football that we've seen in 2024, it is nowhere near the expectations we have for this program. That being said, I don't think this roster is as far away as a lot of people across the country might perceive. I think a lot of the Oklahoma fans know, hey, you look at the wide receiver room and say every single potential difference maker we thought we had heading into 2024 hasn't played the majority of the season in 2024. I think we quickly figured out that if you go into SEC play with that bad of an offensive line, it doesn't even matter how much talent you have around in the offense. If you can't run the football and you can't pass protect, you can't move the football consistently in the SEC. And so, yeah, there are some changes that need to be made from a personnel standpoint. There's no arguing that, and we're going to get into it. But I don't think from an overall talent standpoint, this Oklahoma team is as far off as a lot of people think. Now, I want to start with the offensive coordinator position, then talk about, just some potential positions that Oklahoma might be going after in the transfer portal. Now, before we get into it, as always, one to the Oklahoma fans, I think it's pretty clear it's going to be a busy offseason. We're going to be talking a lot about this program, kind of updating the offensive coordinator hot board. We're going to be updating the transfer portal hot board. It's going to be a fun program to talk about the next couple of weeks. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. A lot of different ways you could go about fixing this Oklahoma roster, getting it back ready for 2025. Would love to hear some ideas that y'all have. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Even though Oklahoma has had a really rocky year in 2024, y'all continue to show a ton of love. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start with the offensive coordinator position because I think when you know who your offensive coordinator is, the conversation around the personnel in the offense is going to get a little bit more clear. I want to just fire off some names that we've talked about or have, kind of seen connected to the job over the last couple of weeks. Let's start with my personal favorite. That's Mike Shanahan at Indiana. Look, Mike Shanahan's what Indiana's doing on offense, it is clearly working. Let's not pretend that Indiana has a top 10 roster on the offensive side of the football. Their starting quarterback right now was a very solid MAC quarterback for the majority of his career. This is probably the best coaching job that you've seen across the country. Why not go and get the guy that is kind of working on designing this offense and Mike Shanahan? Couple of different reasons that I like Mike Shanahan. One, he's a proven commodity at every single level of college football. Like, I think people only know him because he's at Indiana right now. This is a guy that's been with Curt Cignetti pretty much everywhere he's been over the last 10 years. There's a reason that Curt Cignetti has skyrocketed through the coaching ranks. And this coaching staff that Curt Cignetti has surrounded himself with going back the last decade, in my opinion, has been elite. Mike Shanahan's been one of those guys. In my opinion, this is my number one choice for Oklahoma because Mike Shanahan's proven that he can develop quarterbacks, but also scheme an offense up. When you have both those boxes checked, chances are you can translate your success on the offensive side of the football pretty much everywhere you go. Mike Shanahan, number one. Number two, Brennan Marion. Want to get into a conversation that I've seen a lot of Oklahoma fans have, and that is, we need to get an offensive coordinator that's going to be around for 2 to 3 years. I don't necessarily disagree with that take, but that should not be the main concern. If you grow and bring in Brennan Marion, he does a really good job for y'all in 2025 and then gets a head coaching job. That's not bad. It's really easy to replace your coordinators when they're getting elevated and taking head coaching jobs. It's a lot harder to replace them when you have to fire them. Because when you're going after good offensive coordinators, they want to see a pathway to go become a head coach. If you can change this program in terms of kind of how Nick Saban had it going, where it's like you go bring in an offensive coordinator, they're there for 2 years, then they get a head coaching job. It's so much easier for Nick Saban to replace that position when it's like, hey, come here 2 years and you're getting a head coaching job too. I don't think that should be the main concern. You look at Brendan Marion, elite recruiter, elite offensive scheme with the go offense. It's different, and I think there are question marks if that offense can translate to the SEC, but he has kind of proven that this offense can work. And I think Brendan Marion would be a really interesting. I think it'd be exciting for a lot of Oklahoma fans to see him as your offensive coordinator. Last one, Joe Craddock at Tulane. I like it. And again, there's a lot of different ways Oklahoma could go. Y'all kind of know my take. I'd rather see an offensive coordinator come in that's going to play complementary football to an elite Oklahoma defense. I feel like there's just been like that contrast in style, even going back to when Jeff Lebby was here, where we want to be a run and gun offense that plays really fast, that puts points up on the board, but then you're not really playing into the strength of the team, which is the defense. I like to see an offensive coordinator come in that is going to run the football, control the time of possession, and play complementary football to what we know is going to be an elite defense on the other side. And Joe Craddock, kind of that guy, this Tulane offense, number one in the country in time of possession. The one question mark you have with Joe Craddock coming over from Tulane is when you've seen him as an offensive coordinator in the SEC at Arkansas, it's been really bad. So all his success has come at the G5 level. He's not a proven offensive coordinator in the SEC. That's the only question that you have with Joe Craddock. And again, there are so many different offensive coordinators that I think would be really good hires for Oklahoma. Those are probably my top three choices. Once you know who the offensive coordinator is, it's going to be a lot easier to address the personnel in the transfer portal. Now let's start with the quarterback position. Jackson Arnold, Mike Hawkins. I think there's a very real possibility that both of these quarterbacks are back in 2025. I think there's also a real possibility that only one of them are back. And so I think you first got to figure out like how many bodies do we have in this quarterback room. Regardless of who's back, I would not be surprised to see the offensive coordinator that comes in go out and get a quarterback that thinks they can at least add competition or just run their offense at a higher level. Again, it's hard to evaluate the quarterback position for Oklahoma because the pass catchers and offensive line have been so bad for Oklahoma. I'm not out on guys like Mike Hawkins or Jackson Arnold. That the jury's still out for both of those quarterbacks. And so I think there are some quarterbacks that will emerge that Oklahoma definitely kicks the tires on. That conversation will get a little bit more clear as you bring in an offensive coordinator. Look, Darian Mensah, say you were to go get Tulane's Joe Craddock. Darian Mensah, that kid I think's a beauty. I think he is a very good quarterback that was under recruited out of high school, came to Tulane, beat out a former 5-star in Ty Thompson to win that job. And this Tulane offense has been one of the best group of 5 offenses that we see in the country. You wouldn't be surprised if Joe Craddock said, hey, I want to bring in Darren Mensah. He knows what I want to do on offense, and he's proven that he can do it even when they bump up against some really good defenses at the Power 5 level. I've been really impressed with Darian Mensah. I think they could certainly bring him in. Again, that conversation is going to get a little bit more clear. You look at the pass catchers, this just kind of has to deal with like Deion Burks, Nick Anderson, Jaden Gibson, Andrew Anthony. Like, who's going to be back for this Oklahoma team in 2025? When we get that answer, that'll be a lot more. It'll be a lot more of a clear conversation in terms of do we need to go to the wide receiver transfer portal market and grab a body or two. I think you have some young talent, right? Jacob Jordan has been one of those guys that has emerged for Oklahoma. Zion Carney, Zion Reagan's two, talented young cats. You have some wide receivers coming in 2025. I think it'll be a position that Oklahoma addresses, especially if they lose some of those bodies like Nick Anderson or Deion Burks. We'll, again, have a little bit more information when we get the news on whether they're staying or not. The offensive line is the big bugaboo. And again, I think this kind of gets to, I don't think this Oklahoma team's that far off. When you go into SEC play with an offensive line that is that bad, it's just hard to have a lot of success. And you saw Oklahoma try to address this in the transfer portal. My biggest, hindsight 2020 question mark about how Oklahoma did it. They signed kind of average offensive linemen that weren't bona fide power four high end starters. And then you go into the SEC and say, these guys can't play at the SEC level. You have a lot of young talent on this offensive line. I think a lot of this conversation depends on, hey, is a guy like Eddie Pierre-Louis or Eugene Brooks, are they going to be ready to take the reins in 2025? That probably answers how aggressive you need to be in the offensive line. But at the tackle position, I think you got to get it right. And I think Brent Venables is certainly feeling the pressure. I would be very surprised if Oklahoma is not a big time player at the offensive tackle position in the offseason. Outside of that, you get the offensive line right. And if you get some of these wide receivers back in 2024 that have been hurt, I look at Oklahoma and say, again, if you can fix this offensive line, this team can compete at a high level in the SEC. There's no question in my mind about it. Now you go over to the defensive side of the football, kind of a similar conversation. I like the young talent that they have on this defense. I think it starts with the linebacker spot. Like Danny Stutzman, you're not going to be able to replace him. It just has been the best off-ball linebacker in the country for the last 2 years. But Kip Lewis, Lewis Carter, Kobe McKenzie, those are guys that we feel really, really good about. And so I think the linebacker room is pretty good. I think the defensive line is pretty good too, right? Jaden Jackson, David Stone going into year 2. R. Mason Thomas, I would be very surprised if he's not back. PJ Adebawore as well. There's a young pipeline for this defensive line, and it's been a really good unit, one of the best units in terms of rushing the passer and stopping the run. The secondary has been the disappointing unit for Oklahoma. And again, you kind of like the young talent that is in this room, right? Eli Bowen has played really, really good. You still have Peyton Bowen there. Reggie Powers, Michael Boganowski, two guys that we really liked in the 2024 class. Again, I think this probably depends on what the development looks like for some of these young cats in this room. I think it could be a good unit. If I was Oklahoma, I'd want to bring in some more experience in the back end. I don't think they need to be all American caliber guys. Think about what Oregon did with Kobe Savage. Like, just go get a solid safety that has played a lot of football. That's a reliable piece in the secondary. That's probably how I address the Oklahoma secondary. Again, I think that Oklahoma's not that far. I think there are some positions on both sides of the football that you'll see them address, and those positions will be a little bit more clear once we get news on what this roster is going to look like in 2025. It starts with nailing the offensive coordinator spot. I think Oklahoma is probably going to be the most appealing offensive coordinator opening that you see across the country. And so I think there's a lot of reason to believe that if you get the offensive coordinator spot right, this team's not that far off. If you can just address the glaring problems that you have on this roster, I think it can be awfully competitive in 2025. Brent Venables has done a really good job on the recruiting trail. There's clearly a young pipeline of talent that you have on this roster. We're going to talk a lot about it. We know Oklahoma is going to be aggressive in the transfer portal. They have been every single year since BV has gotten there. We'll break it all down. We'll continue this conversation. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, let it fly in the comment section. A lot of the input that you guys put in the comment section is going to kind of shape the conversations that we have over the next couple of weeks. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.